Okay, welcome. In this session we will look a little bit about web browser security, maybe not the standard one or the standard web security topics. My name is Achim Brucker. I'm a senior lecturer at the University of Sheffield working on software security topics. I have a rather long history in software security for more than 15 years. Not only at universities, I also worked for a very long time in the central security team of a large software vendor with more than 25,000 developers. And I will present the work together with Michael Herzberg, who is a PhD student at the University of Sheffield and also working on browser security topics. So let's have a quick look at web browsers. They are becoming the new operating system of our time. We are no longer discussing which operating system are we using on our computers, and is the operating system compatible with the applications I want to run. We are more discussing that on the browser level. Does the website nicely look in Safari or Chrome? And when I mean they're becoming our operating system, I don't mean that we now also need to close all the windows of our web browser and reboot them if we have problems, rather regularly sometimes. It's more like there are games running in the web browser, not only simple ones, maybe those 80-style ones, but really complex ones with very advanced user interfaces and also requiring rather advanced graphical display capabilities. We are using a hell lot of different types of application in the cloud, which is effectively then running at least parts of it in our web browser. This includes in the meantime graphical applications like Photoshop, which you would have thought is not really possible or not, at least not usable since a couple of years ago. That includes things like email or data. We are working in the web browser with data that we definitely would consider to be personal and privacy critical. E-banking, similarly, definitely a security critical area. And it's not only those front ends or applications that we know from our personal life. It's also that more and more businesses are actually using applications running in the web browser, and traditional ERP systems are now moving the front-end part more or less exclusively into the web browser, so that also large enterprises are processing and displaying their whole company secrets, all the data of the employees in web browsers. So web browsers are really becoming security critical as well as critical with respect to reliability of them, so they're really an important part of our software stack today. So what is done to protecting the security and safety of all those applications running in web browsers and the users of those applications? Actually quite a lot. And if you browse through the program of today, there are talks about HTTP-only flags, SSL flags, same origin policy, content security policy. We've seen that over years. This is a lot what website developers or web application developers can do to make it harder for attackers to attack web applications. But most of those security mechanisms are actually being developed with the intention of protecting the company offering web applications, protecting the infrastructure of that company, and not really thought from the side of what do I need to do to protect the actual end users of a web browser and the data and the privacy that, of the data that might be stored on the computer of the people running a web browser. And that's the topic that we want to have a look at today. So web browsers as such are pretty secure. The major browser vendors are taking security really seriously. They are definitely on the forefront with respect to secure software development, patch processes, in terms of how they handle security incidents being reported to them. For many others in the software industry, they really are role model. So I'm not blaming Google, Apple, Mozilla about the security of their browsers. They're really investing a lot, making the core browser a secure and trustworthy piece of software. But we have that good basis for security, and that if we add extensions, so if we change the behavior of that web browser, we might open up a backdoor, and even worse, as we are installing extensions into our browser, those extensions can attack the core security of our web browser from inside. And that's a little bit frightening. So let's have a look what extensions are. So Google, and I'm talking here about Chrome extensions, not because Chrome extensions are particularly insecure, they're actually not. It's more like, at the moment, it looks like that all major browser vendors are converging towards the extension model that Chrome is currently implementing. So also for Firefox, it seems to be that what is there called add-ons or plugins will move into the same format and the same feature set and the same security mechanisms that Chrome has. And also Apple announced for Safari that they are planning to support this specific type of extensions. So we are looking at the moment at Chrome extension because they seem to be the future. Google, you're going on the developer side of Google, tells us extensions are small software programs with little to no user interface. Small things that you install into your web browser, that sounds harmless. So let's have a look what type of extensions are actually in the App Store. They are complete gains. I would claim that's not necessarily no user interface or a small user interface. That's actually a pretty complex one. And if you look a little bit closer at the actual size of that extension, it's over 400 megabytes. I know times are over where the typical home computer had something like 16 kilobytes of RAM, but still I would consider 400 megabytes as an extension that I install into my web browser, not a small software program. Yes, we can argue that a lot of that size here will be video or audio files, but still there are proper programs that can be rather large and complex, and they can have sophisticated user interfaces. Extensions can modify the interface of your web browser, so they can introduce new buttons. They can change the behavior of already existing buttons. They can modify web pages, so everything what you see. So if I have that web page and I have an extension installed, that extension could remove parts of the website. We all know that from our ad blocker, which is a very common extension, removing parts of the website. But of course you also want to be sure that only ads are actually removed and maybe not parts of your banking information when you are filling out a wire transfer. If I remove a couple of numbers there, the semantics differ significantly. And they might also modify each and every web request. So what you enter into the web browser and what you send to third-party servers, to web applications, they might enter as well. And transport encryption doesn't help. They are running in the browser and they are seeing all the data before it becomes SSL encrypted and sent over the wire. So there could be extensions theoretically out there that modify the amount of your wire transfer before the wire transfer is sent to the bank. Therefore, it's so important that if you have a second factor authentication for your wire transfer, that this also shows you the amount that you want to make on your second device, be it a mobile phone with an SMS, text message or whatsoever, so that you can validate the information that is actually processed by the backend system of your bank. So let's search for extensions in the store, because that sounds a little bit artificial. Simple extensions, we've seen it already in one of the talks today. Typical application, calculators. Simple, trivial, small. Searching for them, there are actually a couple of them. Last time I counted something like 50 to 60 at least. And if we try to install them, so there's one that looks really nice. We click on install, and our browser is telling us this extension can read and change all your data on the website you visit. Actually on all websites you visit. Would that be a permission request that you expect from a calculator? Most likely not. Sadly, this is the permission that is most widely used by extension, and it's actually hard to find a calculator extension that doesn't request it. Last week when I did that in my office, out of the first 15 calculator apps being shown, 13 of them require this or a similar powerful permission. We didn't have yet the time to look into the source code to check what they're actually doing with it. But potentially, you're allowing that extension to do something which could be very harmful to the security and privacy of your data. Has this been exploited already? Yes, of course. There was actually one case last year which surprised me a lot because it wasn't discussed a lot in the newspapers outside of Germany. Even so, that's an extension which is offered from a Finnish company. It's offered worldwide. It's called Web of Trust, and the purpose of that extension actually is to make web browsing more safe. They're trying to notify you when you're visiting a website, or before you visit a website, when you enter the URL in the search bar or click on a link, that website is known to distribute malware or Trojans, viruses, and whatsoever. For implementing that functionality, obviously, that extension needs to know what URL you want to visit, so what link you are clicking on, what you are entering into the URL bar of your web browser. It sends that, and that's also legitimate, to an external server to check if that URL is blacklisted or not. That's one design how one can implement such a functionality. Nothing bad with that. The interesting part is the data that they collected, they sold that to third parties for data analytics. That's something which actually violated, as far as I understood, the privacy declaration they had in the store. There was a German TV station that bought that data, or actually they claimed they want to buy the data, and got some gigabyte or a couple of gigabytes of test data. The company was showing them, here, that's the type of data we are collecting, so that you can have a look at the quality of the data. And by analyzing that data set, which was officially anonymized, but very badly, and could be easily de-anonymized, they found really critical data in there. There were text declarations of members of the German parliament. In Germany, you can do the text declaration online. That Web of Trust didn't only locked all the URLs being sent to the external server, but also the content entered into web forms. Also interesting, there were details about an international search warrant, where one of the German police officers was using Google Translate for translating a search warrant into English before contacting the colleagues in Great Britain. So I have the feeling, at least analyzing the data of Google Translate already could be very interesting to see what people are using it for. And that led, of course, to the situation that extension was removed from the store, not only for Chrome, also for Firefox, where a similar extension is available. In the meantime, it's back again, and the company is also still operating, so I guess they changed something, maybe the fine print in their privacy declaration. But there's not only privacy violations. We've seen, in terms of security, a lot more news in the press about people trying to make money. Ransomware, for example. And yes, there's also ransomwares in web extensions. Trying to encrypt your hard disk and trying to convince you to pay for it, or simpler approaches to directly monetize extensions. For example, there was just a case in India where an extension replaced the support hotline numbers when you were searching for them on Google. So you did something like, I want to call the Dell support because I have a problem with my Dell computer. And instead of the original Dell phone number, which most likely is cost-free or costs local charges or at least reasonable charges, they replaced them with phone numbers to hotlines where they got a share of the phone charges. And I assume it were phone numbers with very high charges. Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense. So, again, the case, you install a web extension, and as a side effect, you can no longer trust what the web browser is actually showing to you. There is one nicely, which actually helps you because it's moving the mouse around for you and clicking buttons. For example, on advertisements that developer of that extension is putting on websites, so it's generating or increasing his own revenue. Also a very nice idea. That extension also has a nice trick for actually hiding in the web browser. So we are seeing similar techniques like in operating systems, where these kind of bad extensions are trying to hide themselves, that you not easily can find out that you actually installed in the web browser. So, why are people actually installing them? I don't know, but there are a couple of ideas. We've seen also by big companies extensions that were distributed with other software and, so to speak, side-loaded to the web browser. Google is in the meantime trying to prevent that in Chrome, so that way it shouldn't work anymore. But what still works is, imagine you're visiting a website, and that's not made up, that's actually happening, as an, let's say, not very advanced technical user, and you want to close that website, or leave that website, you are clicking on a link, and the following happens. The website is telling you, yeah, before you leave that website, you have to install an extension. And there's a nice OK and cancel button. And you press cancel, and cancel, and cancel, and cancel. Still not working. I guess that for a lot of people that are not IT experts, after the third or fourth of those nagging windows, they will actually install that extension. So that seems to work. I'm pretty sure it works. Clearly, if you end up that, close your web browser and don't install the extension. There's, at the meantime at least, no better way. If you are not very tech savvy, if you are tech savvy, people that develop JavaScript most likely know how to bring up their JavaScript developer console and change the JavaScript in the website that is actually generating those windows. So with that, I hand over to Michael, which will give you a little bit more details about the developer perspective.
Exactly, so let's have a look how an extension can actually do all these nasty things to you and your web browser. So how do extensions work from the developer perspective? How is such an extension structured? On the left-hand side, you see the general architecture of a web browser with support for extensions. You see the parts related to the extensions highlighted in yellow here, and these yellow parts are actually shipped with an extension. So we see a main part of an extension lives basically in its own sort of invisible tab in your web browser, where it is confined to and can't immediately jump into all the other tabs that you might have opened. But in order to do anything interesting with your websites, an extension can ship so-called content scripts that you see injected into the tabs here. And with that, we see they basically run parallelly to your site scripts that come from the website. And they can't necessarily talk to each other by using JavaScript variables, for example, but they can certainly modify the same DOM, so basically the website that you see. On the other hand, extensions don't just have content scripts, they also have a background script, which is basically the site that is running in the tab. And an extension has access to pretty nice APIs in there, access to that whole extension API, that allows an extension to access your tabs or access other connection-related details from other tabs, for example. So it's a pretty deep access to the browser internals that an extension can do from there. And yeah, it has also various other means of communication to natively installed apps, for example. So that's only very few extensions that make use of that connection. For example, Adobe has a connection in its store where it uses this bridge to talk to your Adobe that's normally installed on your computer to, I don't know, pipe a PDF to the outside of the browser for you to open in your native PDF viewer. So this is basically how an extension integrates into your web browser. And it doesn't have immediate access to all these APIs, of course, and isn't immediately injected into all the tabs that you might have opened. So there exists a permission system where your extension can request permissions from the web browser, which results in a pop-up box that we saw earlier. This extension requests to read and write all your data. And all this is specified in the manifest of the extension. Here on the right we see a small example of that. So in that manifest the extension specifies its name, its version, a small description, its permissions, which do what you would expect that an extension declares to which websites it wants to have access to. This all URL one is pretty popular and results in the message we saw earlier. And it also specifies on which websites you would like to have content scripts into it and in which time of the document loading process. So yeah, as you can see, that manifest gives an extension a lot of power. So let's have a closer look into that permission system. So how does it work and why do we still see so many nasty apps in the store? So on the one hand side, the background scripts, the ones that are running in its own tab belonging to the extension. There is a sort of two-dimensional permission system in place. So on the one hand, we have a bunch of functional permissions that govern the access to, for example, the different tabs that the API to access the different tabs in your browser, to even desktop capture, or to access the bookmarks of your browser. And on the other hand, you have host permissions that say on which websites can you do these things. For example, if an extension requests a web request and Facebook.com, that means that extension can intercept all browser web requests to Facebook.com, but not to any other sites. And on the other hand, we have the content scripts, the ones that get injected into other sites, and there's basically no permission system. So an extension either declares, okay, I would like to have my script in this website or not. But once it is injected, it can basically do anything to that website. So, we were monitoring quite a few extensions over the last couple months. The extensions are mainly, or I think exclusively, distributed via the Chrome Web Store. We monitored about 125,000 additional Chrome features. So they're not just extension in that store, but Google keeps adding more kind of things to that store, especially when you look at Chromebooks or at the products like Google Docs and Google Sheets. All these kind of extension or add-ons, they run by many different names. They are found in that store. And what we found so far that, most of them are extensions at this point. But there are also other kinds of extensions upcoming. For example, ones that you don't install into your browser, but into your Google Docs. So there's certainly more trouble upcoming there. But we are focusing on the extensions. So of these 125,000 things in the store, about 60% were actually extensions. So we're focusing on these. And they are part of a wide variety of categories. So you see most extensions, about a third, think they contribute to your productivity in your browser. 15% actually were related to fun. So I guess these must be the games that we saw earlier, for example. And then it spreads very widely with many categories. We also found that a lot of extensions actually don't get downloaded very often. So you see about 75% of the extension in our repository were downloaded less than 1,000 times. And Google caps the download numbers at 10 million. So we saw about, I think 200 extensions in its store that reached that milestones. Extensions like, the popular ones like AdBlock, for example. As we know, extensions are quite big. So they're not just the 5 lines of JavaScript that add a small button or do something small to your website. we found a significant amount of extensions are actually larger than 100 kilobytes and a lot even larger than 10 megabytes. The games that we saw, for example, earlier, I guess. And of course, as with most JavaScript projects, developers like to ship libraries, and lots of them, and sometimes even in different versions. And that's how you end up with extensions with a lot of JavaScript lines. So you see around 15,000 extensions had more than 10,000 lines of JavaScript code. There is surely a lot of frameworks in there. So let's have a look at what kind of permission requests we found in the extensions that we analyzed. So a very popular case, which results in a message like this already, and this is just the start of my 3 cases. Request the permissions to access your tabs and all URLs. So we learned that extensions, they don't try to save on the permissions that they request. And we found a very common pattern that many extensions, as already suggested by their names, they really just want to interact with 1 or 2 websites, but they still request a permission that allows them to do something with all URLs. We found that often happened because they like to have their check for the URL on JavaScript. They like to check on every website that you visit with that extension installed, whether or not they are on URL XY. And yeah, that convenience, I guess, for the developer results already in such horrifying messages to the user. And yeah, such a permission obviously allows an extension to monitor all your URLs, the full URLs. As we said, things like encryption or SSL, where you would maybe just see the host name, they don't apply here since we're still in the browser. So we get this full nice access to all URLs that are, for example, leaked by Lab of Trust. And we found that around 57% of our extensions, they had the capability to analyze all the URLs that you visit. So it's a very broadly used set of permissions. And many extensions, they also like to run some JavaScript in the website that you visit. They don't just want to hook into your browser tabs and like to see what URLs you're visiting. No, they actually want to run often a small bit of JavaScript in every website to provide the service, whatever they think they're providing. And this is already found in about a third of the extensions that we saw. So yeah, no matter what the extension do, if we trust them or not, the important thing is with these set of requested permissions, the extension has already the capability to completely deface any websites that you visit without you noticing, basically. And yeah, the third kind of permission, or set of permissions that we identified, are permissions that also request a permission called web request. So that's a part of the Chrome extension API, and that actually allows an extension to really act like Wireshark similar and intercept all requests that your tabs do. And that includes also access to the headers that get sent or received. And your extension, if you request that permission, gets to intercept them and play around as they like with them. So you see nice developer extensions, for example, that provide you a very handy kind of test environment by just disabling all CSP headers in everything you do in that browser. I mean, that makes testing so much nicer, right? But that is actually a permission that we also found quite often in about 10% of these extensions. And yeah, we have still no real theory why so many extensions request that, since many of the ones we looked at least from the name or what they claim to do, they shouldn't need this kind of wide-ranging extensions. It has the possibility of permissions. It has the possibility of really tearing down most of the security that your browser provides usually. And I have this picture here on the right, because basically, with all these three sets of permissions, what the user sees when they install an extension is basically the same. They see this, read and change all data on the websites that you visit, and you see that warning on so many extensions, at least a third of them, that I guess after a few times the user is like, well, I guess if a calculator needs this kind of permission, then it surely can't be that bad, and yeah, let's just install it. That extension sounds cool. So the user doesn't really benefit that much from that permission system. But let's have a small look at what it takes to create a small extension that collects all your cookies and sends them to another server on any website that you visit. So we see our extension consists out of two files, a content script and a manifest. Our manifest is basically not much more than what we saw earlier. It simply requests to have a content script, this one, injected into every website that you visit on all URLs. And what does the content script do? Well, it really doesn't need to do anything fancy. It does a simple XML HTTP request, takes your cookies out of your document, and sends them away. And that basically with permissions that you find in many extensions. If they actually do something like that, we don't know. But they certainly could add this kind of stuff pretty easily with permissions they've already requested. And that is quite a scary thought. Now, as we saw earlier, more and more of these people, of course, also want to make money with extensions. And what I guess is also a quite natural way, and what we found in a couple of extensions, is related to Amazon tags. So I don't know how familiar you are with Amazon tags or Amazon referrals, or these affiliate programs. So basically, when you shop on Amazon and use a specially prepared link, which has this tag thing in the URL, then the owner of this tag gets a small percentage of the amount of money that you spend on Amazon. And that is, of course, an interesting target for your extension developer, since why not add that tag to every Amazon URL of our victim? It's not like he will probably care or even notice, then he probably also won't mind, and there's basically no way he'll be affected or find out. Let's have a quick look how this extension here has been doing that, and it really doesn't try to obfuscate much or hide much. All I did here was putting that piece of JavaScript through a prettifier since it was minified, but otherwise that is basically what you find. So as we see, the extension has access to all URLs that you visit, so it can basically just use a small regex, Amazon, and I guess they have a list of TLDs that they also use. You can just check if you're running on this kind of host, if that is the current URL. No, then it simply adds that tag to the URL and returns the modified URL. And that is what the user will most likely use for his Amazon shopping from now on, and the creator of this extension will benefit.
Can you create the extension for yourself and get cheaper Amazon stuff?
Sorry?
Can you create that extension for yourself and get cheaper Amazon stuff?
Yeah, I mean, if you advertise your extension in the store, I mean, it doesn't take much JavaScript to alter these URLs, really.
Get cheaper Amazon stuff.
So, yeah, no reason for an extension developer not to add this, I guess. At least they check. At least they check here if there's already a tag in the URL. I guess they at least don't try to,
They're not taking
if the user actually wants to, I don't know, donate some money to a charity by using one of their Amazon links, I guess they at least try not to replace them, but that's about all they care about here, I guess. So at this point I'm going to hand over to Achim again.
Just to follow up here, if you want to make a business out of that, recall that those extensions are de facto presented in the App Store in source code form. So you can download one of the existing extensions and modify it a little bit and re-upload it to the store. So downloading, changing, re-uploading requires basic JavaScript knowledge, a Google account, maybe an afternoon worth of work, and you need to invest £5 that Google is charging for enabling your account for being allowed for uploading extensions and offering them to everybody in the store. So with an upfront investment of an evening and £5, you're free to go.
Sounds good.
If it pays off, I don't know, because I don't know what the shares in the Amazon referral program are and how many users you actually need to convince to install your extension.
Enough stuff with Amazon, I can probably pay for it myself.
At least you get a discount.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah. And I mean, there are legitimate extensions that do that as well, that, for example, donate the revenue they are making to a charity. So not each and every extension that has that is, by definition, a bad one. There might be good ones, donating that to cancer research or whatever good cause. So we are asking ourselves, how can we improve that situation? And that's a little bit, I mean, on the one hand, my academic hat, so to speak, thinks, oh, that's so defect, we cannot repair it anymore. We should get rid of the current permission system and come up with something completely new and shiny, which is designed with the users and the developers in mind and not just carried over from website development to browser development. On my more industry experienced hat, I think we also need a pragmatic solution, because coming up with a new permission model, a new sandboxing model, might be nice, but it's most likely not feasible, given the install base of Chrome, the number of extensions being available. But still, we want to contribute, at least with our work, a little bit towards making web browsing and the use of browsers for critical applications more secure and more safe in terms of protecting the integrity, the confidentiality, and the privacy of the people using the web browser and the companies using web applications, and not only building web security mostly up from the perspective of companies offering web services. So on the long term, the more academic side, sandboxing extensions might be a good idea. Different permission models with a different granularity, with different explanations. Maybe what we've seen on Android, moving from a static permission model, where you grant permissions at the moment when you install an app on Android or an extension in your browser, to a more dynamic one, where the extension asks for a permission in the context of an action it is currently executing. That makes it easier to explain why you need that specific permission. And then if you grant that multiple times in the same setting, then maybe you can store that permanently. So there's a typical example on the Android world. One of the reasons why the torch function is now in the Android OS. A couple of years ago, all those kind of torch apps were those malware spreading as hell, and they required permissions which were hard to explain to non-technical users. Why does a torch app require a permission for your camera? Yes, the light is actually the flashlight, so there's a technical reason for that. But when you're installing that and you're not a technically savvy user, it might be hard to make that transitional step. It's different when you're starting up that app and the app is explaining to you, I want to switch on the flashlight, and therefore I need to have the permission to access the camera. I don't actually want to take a photo, and I need it now, and I give that permission back when you close the application. Maybe that already helps pragmatically for users. Better explanations, not hiding permissions that actually request very different things into the same explanation. But it's also very difficult to come up with better explanations and a better permission system. So one naive thought, for example, could be, changing CSS properties, only modifying them, is rather harmless. Yes, it only changes the design on the website, but white text on white background is rather invisible for us as humans. Technically, it's still there. And if I blank out a couple of numbers in your next bank statement or salary statement, it makes actually a difference. What is a little bit more our playground is coming up with better analysis tools for extensions. Google is already doing a lot for detecting malicious extensions when you upload them, but they are not perfect. We are working on different approaches for trying to improve that situation. So there will be hopefully updates in the future from us on that front. But coming a little bit more to pragmatic parts, but before I discuss that slide, a quick question. Who has extensions or add-ons installed in the browser? A couple. Does anybody know at the moment how many? Roughly. More than 5? Still quite a lot, yeah. Maybe the same for me. I'm always surprised. I also have something between 5 and 10 extensions in there. Most likely those ones with low download numbers, because they're kind of developer extensions, which are usually more in the 10,000s or 100,000s of downloads. And I'm not really sure what they are doing. One good way of mitigating that issue, at least a little bit out of this, is the use of browser profiles. That's a little type of sandbox the browser provides you, where you can configure your browser differently for different purposes. So you could set up a specific browser profile for e-banking or for shopping stuff or whatever you do where you want to have more privacy or more security, and have other browser profiles in there that have more extensions installed, maybe a gaming profile, whatever suits you best. That already is a way of mitigating that issue to a certain extent, and luckily the browsers are becoming better in terms of making it easy to switch profiles and making it also visible in which profile you are currently in. I mean, it doesn't solve the problem if I have 20 profiles and I need to go into some deep configuration page to find out actually which is the active profile. Then I will never do that. In general, if we're looking at extensions or software and discuss security, there are two approaches. One is the frequent updates one. The idea behind that is if you update frequently, you always have the latest version of the extension. That should be secure. And if you have a responsible software developer developing that extension, that model should you at least help you to mitigate accidental security issues in the application. Those typical security issues that happen because somebody made a mistake when developing or configuring that extension. Requesting permissions too broadly, forgetting to sanitize some input, or accessing typos in file areas being accessed or so. That should be mitigated by that approach. And most likely for non-cooperative environments, that's the best what we can do at the moment. Companies tend to be on the other side. They tend to do strict governance and restrict what you actually can install on your machine. If you have a company notebook, often it's pretty much locked down. Interestingly enough, I haven't seen a company yet locking down the browser extensions that you installed. And I've seen browser extensions in the store accessing confidential information from the intranet from companies. So it is actually an issue. Clearly, both approaches are not ideal. Both do not solve the problem completely. What we actually want to have is something in between. Something which is fast, which can enforce like a police car, and maybe is a little bit adaptable to our needs. And we can tweak around a little bit with it. So there, the pragmatic proposal, or the only proposal I can make you on that side is, I still think the frequent updates are for the non-tech savvy users something they shouldn't disable, knowing that they have their risks in itself. Lately we have the case that one of those update mechanisms, actually also again from a German tech software I think, was used for distributing malware. In the case of the extensions, there's another risk. Those extensions change owner, and there are actually also bad guys that try to buy extensions with a large user base. So if you look at the Chrome store and to the discussion boards, in extensions which are in the medium range with respect to the download numbers. So not the top ones, because they're usually coming from the big companies, but medium size. You see offers like, I'm offering you to buy this extension for a certain amount of money, and clearly the guy buying it wants to make some money themselves out of it by injecting some malicious code into that extension which already has a large user base. And if the automatic updates are enabled, whenever you start your Chrome or your web browser, it checks as a new version available and would install the new version then with the malicious software in there. So clearly there's a risk as well. But still, a combination of frequent updates and checking where it's actually providing those extensions. In the Chrome store, is it a company like Google? Is it something that I really want to have? So if you're looking, for example, for a Facebook extension that improves somehow the experience of using Facebook, then it's maybe a good idea that that extension is provided by somebody known in the Facebook universe. Maybe Facebook themselves, maybe a company they are partnering with, and maybe not one of my random first semester students. So a combination out of both might be pragmatically the best that you can do at the moment. So the clear final guidelines before we come to the Q&A. Check for the vendors of the extensions that you install. Check the permissions. There are only a few extensions that actually would require permissions on all active domains. A Facebook extension should only request the permission to modify your Facebook experience. An extension working in the environment of Google Apps usually only needs the rights for working or being active on Google domains. Similarly, a YouTube extension should work on YouTube, but not necessarily on your e-banking website. I don't see a reason for that. Use browser profiles and be a little bit aware of the risks. So I started to look once in a while, let's say once a month, into the list of extensions that I actually have installed. And if I have the feeling I don't need that extension anymore, I deinstall it. And I'm using also, when I'm testing extension, temporary browser profiles to mitigate that risk that I'm not installing stuff that I not know what it actually is into my web browser and run it blindly with full trust. So it's really similarly powerful than an operating system application. You wouldn't download today in 2017 just arbitrary computer programs from the internet and execute them. On Windows you get that nice dialog box, most likely that it's not signed by Microsoft. Similarly, a caution should be taken with extensions. With that, thank you very much, and we would enjoy a couple of questions.
So, why is Google so slack with the permissions they allow people to use when they're publishing these extensions? Do they not review them?
It seems that they are not doing a careful review, but it's a difficult problem. I mean, theoretically in computer science one could argue it's even undecidable. It's a hard problem to decide what is the minimum set of minimum set of permissions an extension requires. And Google gets a lot of those to check, so they are trying. I really believe they are doing a lot, but it's a very hard problem. I would more criticize the actual permission model, where the permissions are mainly grouped by functionality, but not from a security perspective. So anything requiring access to microphones and video cameras is put into one permission, more or less, or one set of permissions, whereas it's different if I want to do a screencast, which requires those permissions as well, or just recording some audio, or just taking a photograph.
Is there any reason possibly why you're not able to necessarily revoke rights once applications and extensions are installed? It seems an easy fix for something like a calculator. It asks for when you install it and then take it away afterwards. But none of them very few things seem to let you do that.
That was also our first thought. Technically, that's at least for non-developers not easily possible, because due to other security mechanisms actually contradicting each other. Google has a system in place where they want to ensure that the extension that is on your hard disk is genuine. So they are computing whenever the browser starts a hash value over the installed code on your hard disk and compare it with the one in the Chrome store. If you modify the permission set, then the hash value doesn't match and it's re-downloaded and reinstalled. With that, they are trying to circumvent people that ship extensions as part of their installer of a bigger application and sideload them into the browser. If you enable the developer option in Chrome, you can unpack extensions and can do that. Yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned locking down browser extensions at the enterprise level. I'm not familiar with any browsers that actually offer enterprise support for doing so. Am I just missing a trick?
Me neither. Honestly, I haven't looked into that. I would have thought that at least on Windows, Microsoft is offering something.
Yeah, I mean, I don't support any Windows users in my environment. It's all Linux and Mac based.
You can do it with Chrome for business.
There is actually on Debian, which I'm using. In the meantime, the Chromium version they are shipping by default doesn't allow you to install extensions, except the ones shipped by Debian as well. Okay. And you have to enable them explicitly via a command line flag. But they implemented that by changing the source code. And if this increases the security or not is currently debated. There was a question over there.
Yeah. As we know, most people don't read terms and conditions. They don't read screens. So a pop-up would say something, you say, oh yeah, I want this. You click OK. What about a simple red triangle if you used all URLs? At least then there's a bit more of a visual.
Yeah.
That people can, wasn't expecting that.
Clearly, how to present that information concisely and understandable to users is important. To be frank, I'm a computer scientist and not a human interaction expert. I've seen in research projects I did where we looked at permissions on Android, they're trying to compare also, saying there's an extension offering the same functionality basically, but they require less permissions and try to help users by selecting them when they are ranked in the web store, which is another approach. Clearly, the way how it's presented at the moment is kind of yet another dialog box, and if I click OK, it goes away and I can do what I want to do. I mean, you're working with the computer or enjoying something, you don't want to read terms and conditions.
Like dialog box, you don't like, where you just like clicking Windows and Windows and
Windows. Yeah. Over there?
Very useful presentation, by the way. Thank you. Two-part question. The first one, is it possible that an extension developer may withhold full disclosure of the permissions being set? So he may say, I just need to access your camera, but he may also require access of URL. So is that possibility? The second part of that question would be, should an update be received and you don't give an implicit permission where you so the first release of an extension might have a camera request, but since it's already installed, any updates and have further permissions.
I hope that you can help me out with the second part. The first part I can at least answer in the way that we haven't found a way. We thought about ways of exploiting that scenario, and all the ones we tried, Google already closed in the current versions of Chrome. If we had tried it a year earlier, we had at least found one by installing several extensions and modifying them in situ, but with that hash check, that's already prevented. Do you know how the update is?
So yeah, for the updates, I think if the extension actually requests more permission and update, you get asked when you start Chrome or when that auto update happens. But I don't think that actually happens often, since I feel most developers, they start with many extension permissions, because it makes things easier, and they're not really punished for that, and yeah, I don't think you have that problem very often.
Is it possible for one extension to be able to check on permissions of another extension? So what I'm kind of thinking of is that you could create like a security extension which grasses on the other extensions to kind of give the user more information about what permissions they have.
Like a little snitch.
Yeah.
Type thing.
That's the idea that we also have on our to-do list. We haven't checked it yet. It's not easily possible with the current permission system, because you could do a lot of harm with it. But we've seen extensions which at least work also with the set of installed extensions, rearrange them. So it might be possible. I mean, what I think what is possible is getting the list of installed extensions, and then you can have an external database with the permissions of the versions being stored in the Chrome store. But that could be actually an interesting exercise for us to implement.
So far you've spoken about using an extension to attack the user, but given that these extensions are quite privileged, can someone attack the extension from a web page and use it to attack the user instead? So the extension could be...
Certainly.
Clearly. If the extension, for example, has a unsanitized JavaScript injection problem, then of course a website can exploit that. And actually quite a number of the malicious extensions, if you look at the full-blown attack that people set up, it's a combination of changed websites and extensions. So maybe making the web attacker more powerful.
Because you see a lot of extensions also that you already see that the developers started with a different mindset there. So they use lots of eval all over the place, since they, I guess, start with the feeling, okay, they are writing this privileged extension anyways, and they're using the same JavaScript as on the web, but it's still in a different context. And they also, especially extensions written for specific sites, they look for certain DOM elements and then just eval whatever is in there and things like this. And I imagine that can easily be exploited by other websites as well, that behavior.
Let's take that as the last one to stay in the time.
Are there any, I guess, evaluating the permissions required by apps is relatively trivial once you get it there. Is there any known websites which will provide rights rank, like a ranking for the apps to give you, or to automatically analyse what's in the store and tell you which has got the least privilege?
No. That's
maybe
actually
a project for someone there.
Yeah, I mean, we have all the data available. That could be something which could be easily built on the data that we already have. That's actually also a good idea. Thank you very much. So thanks again. If there are other questions, we are happy to take them offline, but we don't want to kill the time schedule.
Oh yeah.